And now broadcasting from the EFX Sports Studio, it's ESPN EFX Sports Radio with Dr. Jeff Golini.
Well, welcome everybody to another episode of EFX Sports Radio Show. My name is Dr. Jeff Golini, and I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Brian Andrews.
Yes, I'm here in the digital flesh.
How's it going, Brian?
I am doing great, feeling blessed. It's a great day to be alive. Sun shining. What more can you ask for?
You know what? That's exactly it. That's what life's about. Other than carbohydrates.
Other than carbohydrates, yes. Let's talk about some carbs, some fuel.
Absolutely. You know, I thought it'd be interesting for our listeners, to kind of talk about carbohydrates and athletes. You know, for so many years, this whole low-carb thing just plagued our minds. And, I noticed that it rolled over into athletes. And, here in Montana, Montana is sometimes, they always say, is a few years behind like California and New York. Although with the internet and stuff, we're not that far behind. But we're still seeing athletes here, kids, trying to go no carbs or low carbs and try to perform.
Yeah, it's funny how things catch on. They become literally a phenomenon, and they just become the status quo. This is what you do. I mean, I know there are certain types of athletes that will definitely go after, say, the low-carb thing. And I remember, like you said, I don't know, what is it, about 10 years ago when it really was strong? That whole almost zero-carb type thing. But, yeah, it works for some people to a degree. But, my goodness, if you're an athlete, you need fuel like a car.
Well, and our bodies are designed. I mean, I've read a lot of these diets that, all these different CrossFitters and, people are doing, paleo diet and what have you. And, okay, it kind of makes sense, but our bodies haven't changed. I mean, back in the old days, I'm sorry, they still ate wheat and grains. They didn't just eat all meat,
Oh, of course.
And, of course, they weren't athletes, They were out trudging through the wilderness. But, as science and as technology has grown and we actually now can monitor our systems, I mean, my goodness, like you said, there are a lot of sources for fuel, but carbohydrates are the quickest and the number one source, and athletes do need them.
Yeah.
So what kind of carbs do you like?
I'm big into more of the complex side, simply because of the insulin response that you don't get. Of course, Carbolin, my goodness. In fact, I got a quick story I'll tell you in just a second about a guy here locally we put on that and what it did for him. But I tend to go more to the brown rices, the oatmeals, because of the fiber. I don't eat it a lot, but boy, when my wife makes spaghetti, that's I put a hurting on myself that night.
Yeah, that's some pretty good stuff. So what, let's talk about what athletes need. It doesn't matter whether you're 9 years old or you're 49 years old. I mean, carbs are carbs. So what would you recommend to somebody the night before? I mean, what's the best type of complex carbohydrates?
Well, kind of going back to what I said, I mean, you've got like sweet potato, the brown rices. Of course, oatmeal is kind of a staple. And again, some people react differently to these types of things, but you want something that's going to be processed much slower through your system to really load you with glycogen, which is the actual fuel your muscle cells are going to burn. It's stored in your liver and in the muscle tissue itself. So it just makes sense that you put plenty there before you go out. I mean, if I'm going to go drive across country, or I should say go 300 miles, I'm not going to put a gallon in my car. I'm going to fill the thing up.
And, when I was in college, this is quite a few years ago, but they still do it now. Our pre-game on Saturday morning meal was steak and eggs. We had pancakes and stuff, but, that's fine, being that we were having that at like 7 o'clock in the morning and the game wasn't till 2. But I'm seeing a lot of teams, an hour or 2 hours before are eating all this heavy type of stuff. That's the worst thing you want to do. You need those complex carbohydrates several hours prior. And, it's okay to have some protein if you're, 5-6 hours before your event, but you surely don't want to do that beforehand. And going to McDonald's and, having a fish sandwich or a apple pie is not the right type of carbohydrates that we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. And you're talking about this low carb thing. I've talked to numerous people, and I'm still to this day pretty shocked by how many are just so carb phobic, because I think that category of food is the thing that's making them overweight or feel sluggish. And yeah, there's some truth to it, but my goodness, what else are these people eating? And then I ask them, so what do you actually do? Oh, I'm a marathon runner. Oh, I'm a CrossFitter. Or I do something, especially where there's endurance involved. And I just sit there, scratch my head going, I mean, do you not understand that is what your body needs more than anything else you told me about protein or some fancy supplement you want to take?
And, that's a good point, because, carbs have a bad rap. You eat carbs, you get fat. That is absolutely false. Calories are what cause body fat.
Absolutely.
You eat too much, you eat more than what you can burn, it's going to be stored as body fat. I mean, that's what body fat is. So it's not necessarily carbohydrates. It's just that, all the things that people like to eat, all the sweets and cakes and pies, candies, those are all carbohydrates. Hence, carbs kind of get that bad rep. But I always say it's the quality. The higher the quality, the food you put into your body, the higher the quality muscle you build, the higher the quality of output. So that's kind of what it's all gauged. I like the night before, when I played sports, I like pancakes, and like you said, pastas are good. Baked potatoes and sweet potatoes are absorbed a little bit quicker. Those are still great. Those are things that I like, 3 or 4 hours before, so my last meal before I go train. Those are things that are a little bit quicker. One of the things I wanted to stress is stay away from these sugar drinks. I'm not going to mention any names, but you can find them in the grocery stores that everybody drinks as the ultimate hydration drink before a game. It's sugar. That's the most counterproductive thing that an athlete could take before, during, or after an event. Your thoughts, Brian?
Well, I was going to say, I think the illusion that comes with that is, do they work? Yeah, they work, but it's such a short-term fix because it's getting in your system. It's like lighting a firecracker, boom, then it's gone. That's the issue.
And that crash.
So you feel good for a second, right? And then you hit this massive crash, and then you got to kind of hit the well again. Well, what's the point?
And also, these caffeinated sugar drinks. Do not give your kids a caffeine drink before practice, before a game, halftime, during the wrestling match. And the same thing with adults. If you are in sports, don't take caffeine. That constricts. That's not what you want. If you want to go into the gym and have an intense workout for an hour, hey, that's what pre-workouts and caffeine's for, but they're not for, practices and games and things.
Well, and especially if you're going to be outside, because caffeine has also been shown to dehydrate, or at least lend to that effect. So if I'm outside in 98-degree weather running around a soccer field or football practice for 3 hours, come on. I mean, that is exactly what you do not want.
I was earlier this year, the Montana State High School Wrestling tournament was going on. There was something like 10,000 people there, and I think there was about 3,000 athletes. Oh, my goodness. I barely could keep my mouth shut watching all these parents pull out of their gym bags, these monsters, these Red Bulls, and giving them to their kids, right before they go wrestle. It was like, oh, you got to be kidding me.
And again, it initially might lead to a better performance. But then again, I think it's like anything else. There are a certain degree of side effects where you got to weigh the good with the bad, and ultimately, it's not doing them any justice to supposedly perform better, especially for, again, where there's endurance involved. Come on, we're not talking about going working out in the gym for 30, 45 minutes.
And I didn't see any of these kids even made it to the finals. So I didn't see any increase in performance.
Well, the other thing that's forgotten, in fact, I've had somebody tell me, a medical doctor, that they're seeing a plethora of issues coming up now, especially with young teens coming in. Their adrenal systems are shot because they're so overloaded on these stimulants. And again, I'm not against a good cup of coffee every now and then, but come on, these things are 100 times stronger than that, it seems like.
Well, absolutely. Plus, it just tears your stomach up. Over time, you're just going to be absorbing things less and less. And, an athlete needs to be able to absorb his proteins and carbs, to be able to be efficient.
Absolutely. And actually, we're getting ready to come up on break. And I thought something I wanted to ask your opinion on that we can, when we come back from the break, What about the glycemic index? It's kind of sent out, I should say, looked upon as the holy grail to a degree when it comes to carbs. But I do have a few questions about that. I thought, hey, maybe you could answer those when you come back.
Sure, sounds good.
Do you know how to properly use carbohydrates to ignite your performance in the field and in the gym? You will now, thanks to this free book by EFX Sports. The Carb User's Guide for Maximum Performance reveals why omitting carbohydrates from your diet can totally crush your gains. Ever wonder how many grams you need for your specific sport? Not anymore. We give you the critical number you need to dominate your competition. You'll even discover the super carb that's taking the athletic world by storm. You must try it to believe it. Go to getcarbolin.com/carb guide today and get your copy absolutely free. Once again, it's getkarbolin.com/CARBGUIDE.
Hey everybody, I'm Billy Gordon. I'm one of the coaches for the Heights Wrestling Club. I just wanted to take a minute and talk to you about EFX Sports and what their products have done for me and my wrestlers and the athletes that I lead. 6 months ago, I got introduced to EFX Sports and I immediately started using them myself. The results have been nothing short of amazing. My body fat and weight have come down drastically. My strength has increased. If you get the opportunity, I highly recommend you give it a shot.
This is Dr. Jeff Golini of All American Pharmaceutical. I'm sure you've been seeing our national brand EFX Sports featuring Carbolin and Crealkaline all around the state lately. Our supplements are formulated for pros to high schoolers to just the average gym goer and are all about improving your game. You can find EFX Sports in Billings at Yellowstone Fitness, Lucky's, Bonanza's Health Food, Granite Fitness, and GNC, just to mention a few. EFX! Well, welcome back to EFX Sport Show Radio. We're talking about carbohydrates for athletes, kind of the do's and don'ts. What are some of the best things to take? And Brian, right before break, you started talking about the glycemic index, which is kind of a big word. But essentially, that is how quickly carbohydrates are absorbed. You know, how quickly are they converted to glycogen, what they do to your insulin. So things with a high glycemic index typically are your fruits, you know, sugar, things that are absorbed very, very quickly. Things with a lower glycemic index are more of your complex carbohydrates, your starch, that are absorbed much slower. So, you know, if you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, you got to be careful and you've got to watch that because you need to keep your sugar in control. The same thing with an athlete. I am not an advocate of sugar. Now, don't get that confused with, you know, fruits are bad, because that's another thing that has kind of filtered into the athletic world that, you know, carbs are bad, therefore fruits are sugar, fruits are no good. Those simple sugars are very important. They act a little bit differently on your system. Remember, fruits contain fructose. Although it does spike insulin and is absorbed very quickly, you don't crash like you do from just pure cane sugar or beet sugar.
Well, and the reason I want to talk about the glycemic index is, while I think it's definitely it has a lot of validity, I think the inherent flaw, at least again from how I understand it, is the way those numbers were derived, where they say this is high or low, is you're testing foods in isolation. Yet most people eat, you know, vegetables and carbs and proteins and fats all together. So I know that will absolutely influence how your blood and your body itself and your blood sugar is going to react.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like the percent daily value. Quite frankly, it means absolutely nothing. You know, as an athlete, you've got to get to know your body and know what foods work best for you. You know, banana before a workout, you know, doesn't work for everybody. You know, trying to refuel at halftime, sucking on a couple pieces of orange, I mean, that might last for 2 or 3 minutes. So again, you know, you got to kind of find out what are the best sources that work for you, which kind of leads to, you know, how much do athletes need? I mean, is there a set amount or is it individualized?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be mostly individualized. Yeah, there's some general guidelines. I mean, if there weren't general guidelines, then a doctor couldn't practice medicine if we were that different. But it's going to come down to giving somebody, I think, like you said, something general to start with, and then it's your body. You have to experiment to see how you get the best effect by taking this. The diet I might follow may be horrific for you or anyone else. And then when you're an athlete who's looking for the extra edge, and we're talking about, again, we said in a previous show, if I'm going to win, say, a race by 1/1000th of a second, I want that edge. And if it's going to come from eating a certain way, I'll do whatever it takes to win.
And we're talking about quality carbohydrates. So to me, donuts, are not a carbohydrate. Okay, yes, they are, but they're not one for athletes. And same with, pastries and junk type stuff. We're talking about higher quality. And of course, how could we not talk about Carbolin if we're talking about the ultimate carbohydrate for athletes? Hey, Bri?
Yeah, there you go. I mean, gosh, it's almost hard to not talk about this, make it sound like a giant sales pitch, but it's just that good. I mean, we just did, another show over in Anaheim. And the response we get from there are people who already know what it is, who already use it. It's almost like we paid them to say what they say to us. It's phenomenal.
And what you guys got to remember is, again, you can't get everything from your foods at the right time. Like Brian said, if you isolate and eat one thing at a time, and we're talking on a completely empty stomach, that is much more beneficial than combining all your food groups in one sitting. So again, how do we replenish those glycogen levels, as an athlete immediately? You got two ways. You can do it with sugar, which again spikes those levels very quickly, but you crash. We're just finishing a clinical trial where we took Carbolin versus sugar, and we saw exactly what we expected from sugar. And again, hitting the wall, running out of gas, those are all things that you don't want to do as an athlete. Carbolin is a very unique homeosaccharide that is a complex carbohydrate, but it's absorbed as quickly as a sugar. So you get all those benefits within 5 minutes. Immediately, your glycogen stores are replenished, and you've got energy to burn. What a better, pre-game, pre-workout sideline drink, replenishing your glycogen stores. When you've finished exercise and you're sore, you've depleted glycogen. You've got to get glycogen back into that system to help that whole recuperation recovery. So that's kind of why I invented Carbolin, and why it is the number one selling carbohydrate in the country through Europa, is because it works.
Yeah. Oh, there's no question about it. I hate to say this, but it's almost addicting. Number one, it tastes good, and most people, when they drink this thing, they just can't believe it doesn't contain sugar, because it does have a pretty sweet taste. Of course, you can put a little more water in to cut that down, but I don't know. Let me go back to let me go back to the story I said I mentioned. There was a guy here locally who's a big time CrossFit athlete. He was a freak of nature type guy. His body weight versus how strong he is. You almost think this guy was doing more than just, say, eating a good diet. Well, I know the guy. He's straight up, and he was big time into what most people are following, the paleo diet, which is just pretty low on carbs. So we finally convinced him, look, you have nothing to lose. Take this bottle and give it a go. Well, he came back for another one, and I think it was a ridiculously short amount of time. And this is almost going to sound like I'm just trying to hype everything up, but this is the God's honest truth. He put over 100 pounds on his deadlift in probably 6 to 8 weeks. Because his body was finally being fueled the way it could to perform at that peak level.
And it's for everybody. Here in Montana, we've really been doing a big push. And if you're listening from Montana, you probably have gotten a Carbolin packet. As a matter of fact, this morning on one of the zone stops that I do, a gal that has gotten some, now she's not an athlete, she's an older lady, and she said, well, this probably isn't good for me. She goes, I just sit around all afternoon sewing. And I said, you got to remember that your brain, your heart are all organs that need to be fueled. I said, do you go long periods of time without eating? She goes, well, yeah, I don't eat breakfast, and usually I just eat dinner. I go, that's terrible. That is an accident waiting to happen. I said, how about tomorrow or this afternoon, take about half of that Carbolin dose before you sit down to sew, and watch how better you feel, how mentally you're going to be more alert, and you probably will even enjoy your hobby much better. So Carbolin is for everybody. It's not just for athletes. Safe for kids. You give it to your kids, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, they think it's like Kool-Aid. And actually a little trick, I keep telling people this, and they look at me like, wow, what a great idea is when they're dieting. Let's say you're even like a bodybuilder, you're trying to cut weight, that type of thing. I say, make popsicles out of it because it lasts longer. Obviously, it's cold, and it kind of almost makes you feel like you're cheating, but you're doing something good for your body. You're not slamming it with sugar.
Well, and the other day, my brother called me, and he's a big Carbolin fan, along with everybody in Ohio. And he said, I'm trying to lose some weight, so I thought, I'm going to cut out some of these starches I use, and I'm only going to use Carbolin as my carbohydrate source. Is that okay? I'm like, you know what? Amen. I mean, that is the perfect carbohydrate to use while you're dieting because you can control how much you eat. Ingest, it tastes great, so it satisfies that sweet tooth. And, plus you get all the benefits of increasing your metabolism, and you feel great from it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and, I want to go back real quick to you'd asked about how much does an athlete really need? Well, of course, it does depend on what you're going to do. And I want to make sure we don't leave people hanging. We actually had one of our expert writers, Chad Shaw, put together a guide. We call it the Carb Users Guide. You can get it right now for free. Go to getcarbolin.com/carb guide. So basically, again, it's getkarbolin.com/CARBGUIDE. It's a free PDF download. It's got everything in there saying, hey, if you're a bodybuilder, you're a runner, you're a football player, it gives you good guidelines to start with on how much carbs to eat. It's a free resource. Please go get it. It's for you.
And at the end of the day, don't take our word for it. Try it for yourself. That's kind of our model. You can get Carbolin anywhere in Montana, any event we're sponsoring. Worldwide, you can get it. You can always go to AAEFX.com. If you can't remember that, just type in EFX Sports. Find our website, go to an info button, and say, hey, I want to try Carbolin. You can also go to allamericanpharmaceutical.com, look for Ask the Scientist, and say, hey, I want to try some Carbolin. We want you to try it first to see how beneficial it is before you even go out and invest in a bottle of it.
There you go. And again, this is a show about sports. And when it comes to sports, it's about one thing, performance. And when you perform your best, you can win.
Absolutely. And in closing, I just want to, again, let you know that be careful with other carbohydrate products. Look at the ingredient. Just because everyone is doing it doesn't mean it's always the best. Most of them contain sugar and salt, and those are things as athletes you don't want to use.
Absolutely.
Well, we thank you much, and we'll catch you next week.
Peace, we out of here.
Thanks for listening to ESPN EFX Sports Radio. Be sure to check out EFX Sports online at AAEFX.com. And don't forget to check out EFX Sports supplements everywhere fitness products are sold.